It began on a blistering afternoon in August 2023, deep in the Nevada desert, just outside a forgotten ghost town called Ravens Hollow. Construction workers clearing ground for a new solar plant stopped when one of their bulldozers struck something solid, a metal container buried in the sand. At first, they thought it was just old debris from a mine shaft, but when they pried the rusted lid open, the smell hit first. Inside was a human skeleton, wrapped neatly in a decaying wool blanket. Next to it, a woman's gold locket, still shining faintly through the dust. Authorities were called immediately, expecting a modern crime. But what they found shocked even veteran detectives. Because according to forensics, the body had been buried for over 50 years. Tonight, we're uncovering the eerie case of the Ravens Hollow skeleton, a mystery that started with a forgotten body and spiraled into a story of betrayal, hidden identities, and a decades-old disappearance that was never meant to be solved. By the end of this story, you'll see how a single item buried in the desert connected 3 generations of secrets, and how the person responsible might still be alive. When the forensics team began their initial analysis, they found that the remains belonged to a female, likely between 25 and 30 years old. There were no signs of animal damage, meaning she'd been carefully placed there. The metal box she was in was a 1950s-style ammunition container, the kind used by soldiers and collectors after World War II. Inside the locket found beside her bones was a black and white photograph. A young woman standing next to a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, smiling under a neon diner sign, and etched faintly into the locket's back, the initials ERW. Detectives cross-referenced missing persons reports from the 1950s and 60s. Weeks passed with nothing, until a retired archivist from Reno mentioned a local legend from 1968. A woman named Eleanor Ruth Whitmore had gone missing after a fight with her husband, a mechanic named Tom Whitmore. She was 27 years old. Neighbors remembered that she'd been packing her bags to leave town when she disappeared. At the time, Tom claimed she'd run off with another man, but her car, her clothes, and all her personal belongings were still at home. And now, half a century later, her initials matched the locket in the desert. Police dug into Tom Whitmore's past, but he died in 1992. However, records revealed something strange. In 1970, just 2 years after Eleanor vanished, Tom sold his auto shop and moved to a remote cabin near Ravens Hollow, the same area where the body was found. Locals recalled how he never let anyone near his property and spent nights digging around his yard. When investigators searched the old cabin site, they found fragments of the same ammunition boxes buried in the ground. But that wasn't all. Under a loose floorboard, they discovered a rusted revolver, along with a faded photograph of Eleanor, torn in half. Even after 50 years, forensic anthropology revealed shocking details. There was a fracture to the skull, consistent with blunt force trauma, and a bullet lodged in the ribcage. Ballistics testing on the revolver found at Tom's cabin matched the bullet recovered from the remains. For detectives, it looked clear. Tom had killed his wife, buried her in the desert, and lived out his life pretending she'd abandoned him. But then something didn't fit. The estimated time of death, based on soil analysis and decomposition, suggested she was buried months after she'd gone missing. If Tom killed her that night in 1968, why was she buried so much later? A new theory began to form when investigators examined the photograph in the locket again. Behind Eleanor, next to the Chevy, was another figure, faint, almost out of frame. A man wearing a military jacket, using facial reconstruction and digital enhancement. They identified him as Sergeant James Jimmy Holloway, a local veteran who worked at a nearby Air Force test site. Eleanor's old letters revealed that she'd been planning to leave Tom for Jimmy, and that she feared her husband had found out. But there was no record of Jimmy after 1968 either, until detectives checked military archives and discovered he'd been honorably discharged but never reported missing. His name just vanished from history. In 2024, ground-penetrating radar was used to scan the land near Tom Whitmore's cabin again. A second anomaly was found, just 20 feet from the first burial. Excavation revealed another skeleton, male, approximately 30 years old, with a military dog tag still intact. It read, James Holloway. So now the question changed. If Tom had killed Eleanor, who killed Jimmy, and why were both their bodies buried near Tom's home, one after the other? Among Tom's belongings found after his death was an unsent letter addressed to Eleanor. In it he wrote, I know what you did. I forgive you, but I can't let you leave. He wasn't supposed to be here that night. Detectives now believe Jimmy confronted Tom the night Eleanor planned to run away. A violent argument broke out, and both ended up dead. But who buried them? Neighbors recalled seeing a young boy, around 10 years old, helping Tom on the property back then. A boy named Michael, the son of Tom's best friend. That boy grew up, left town, and changed his name. Police tracked him down, now an old man in his 70s. When questioned, he broke down and said, I didn't kill them. I just helped them hide them. He said she tripped. He said it was an accident. Michael confessed to helping bury the bodies, but insisted that when he left, only Eleanor was dead, meaning someone buried Jimmy later. In late 2024, forensic examination of the sand layers around both graves revealed that Jimmy's body was buried months after Eleanor's, confirming Michael's story. But there was one final clue. Inside Jimmy's jacket was a single photograph. It showed Eleanor, alive, smiling, sitting in front of the Ravens Hollow diner, dated 3 weeks after the day she was supposedly killed. How is that possible? Was the body in the box truly Eleanor's? DNA testing confirmed that the female remains were indeed related to Eleanor's family. But genetically, she wasn't Eleanor. She was Eleanor's younger sister, Ruth, who'd gone missing years earlier and was presumed to have moved to California. Eleanor, it seemed, had switched identities before her disappearance. So whose body was buried first? And did Eleanor survive under a new name? Investigators began combing through death records across the Southwest and found a shocking entry. In 1987, a woman named Helen Ward, living in New Mexico, had died of heart failure. Her fingerprints were partial, but one matched Eleanor Whitmore. For nearly 20 years after her disappearance, Eleanor had been alive, living quietly under a new identity. No one knows why she came back to Ravens Hollow that final time, or who buried her sister in her place. The desert has a strange way of keeping secrets. For 50 years, it held the truth about a woman who tried to run, a husband who broke, and a lover who vanished. But one question remains unanswered. Thought balloon if Eleanor Whitmore lived for 2 more decades under a false name. Who buried her sister in her place, and why? This story explores the haunting discovery of a woman's body buried in the desert for 50 years. A mystery that unravels into a tangled web of love, deceit, and buried identities. Viewers will discover forensic twists, hidden confessions, and a shocking identity swap that leaves one final question. Who really died in the desert that night?